Hi there, Grand Design owners. Today on your 2020 Grand Design Momentum, we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install MORryde's sliding storage trays. So now that we've got both of our trays installed, we can check their operation. You'll lift up on the handle to be able to slide it out. As you slide it out, you're going to hit your lock position, and that's kind of its maximum travel here. Now we can lift it up just a little bit to get a little more travel. If we look at the yellow tab down here, we can see that it's not butted up against either of the raised sections yet. So we'll lift up on our tray just a little bit and then pull it out a little bit further. This puts it in the locked out position. You can see our yellow tab prevents it from pulling out any further, and it also doesn't push in any further than that. And that's useful for when you're trying to get your gear off of here. You don't want this thing, it slides so easily. You don't want it to be sliding back in, especially if you're trying to lift something heavy off, or sometimes you need to brace yourself a little bit to get it off of there. So this is a nice, good unloading position. If you were to go any further and lift it up than this, and bring our yellow tab to the other side of our raised tab there, this is the removal for like cleaning out this area. If you had some, maybe a lot of dirt, little things you wanted to clean this out, you could fully slide the tray out from this position here. You can see it completely will come off. So we're gonna go ahead and slide that back in. Do not go to this position if you're unloading any gear from the tray. That's mainly, again, just for cleaning. If you need to get some stuff out of here, maybe you had a small item that rolled underneath the tray or something and you just can't quite get it, you can pull it out to be able to do so. Our large tray has a very similar story. It'll slide out to a certain point there, and then it'll stop, and then we can lift it up for our locked out position on this side. And then again, if we go another position, this is going to allow us to completely remove the tray. Now I'm not going to slide this one out because I'm going to need an assistant to help me get it back in. It's so long and so heavy. So we're just going to slide this back in, lift it up. We're now in the lockout position. We'll lift it up again, and we can fully insert it. And what's cool about this longer tray here, this one has a handle mechanism like this on both sides. So we have the exact same positions over on the other side, and we can slide the tray out that way. So let's just go check that out. So here we are, we're just over on the other side. We've got our smaller kind of door here, and this is just our long tray. It has its own handle on this side. We lift up, and you can see it slides out the same. We've got the same positions over here. Here's our locked out position. And of course we can fully remove the tray over here as well. So just lift that up and slide it back in. And it's really convenient to be able to access your stuff on both sides. I know a lot of times you might load this up with a bunch of gear, and maybe that item you need somewhere towards the center, but you don't need the stuff on the outside. You could easily, instead of having to pull out all those things like you did before, slide your tray out, get that thing you need, and then you can slide it right back in. So it saves you a lot of time on getting things in and out, lets you be a little bit more organized. And these trays are really heavy duty. So if you've got some things that are maybe like a metal bottom, I like to mess around with a lot of mechanical stuff. So, I might have a little small dirt bike motor, maybe I'm working on or something. You can even throw that right in here on this tray. It's going to be nice and solid here in this tray. This wooded portion down here, it's plenty strong. It would support the weight, but if you got something that's got some sharp metal edges on it and stuff, it would dig into your kind of your vinyl flooring here. It could make cuts in it, and then that just leads for potential moisture to get down into the wood and potentially damage the wood. So having this in here protects our floor as well, because we can put those things we know are potentially damaging to our floor up on top of here, rather than maybe laying down some towels or something and throwing it on there. So we can take a look here. Our customer's already kind of nicked up some of the spots on his floor here. So adding these trays in here is going to allow us to ensure that no longer happens, no further damage can occur. Just extend the life of the trailer, and again, make things just so much easier to be able to access the gear. It's just kind of a twofold, just speed up your time on storage, make things easier to get to, and also give you a more secure tray to put this in. Because there are a couple of holes here on the sides of the tray. You could utilize those holes as tied downs if you need to, which is pretty nice too, because a lot of times you're just throwing stuff in here and it's just kind of left up to how you've got it stored in here. This gives you an option to actually anchor some things down to these trays if you needed to. So really just expands your storage capabilities that you've got here. Now it is going to take up a little bit of space inside of your compartment here. You have the depth of the tray, the distance that it sits from the floor here to the bottom of the trays, pretty close to a couple of inches. So, you know, you're losing a couple of inches of height there because of that. And you are losing a little bit of space around the edges of the trays, but you're really not sacrificing much to get a lot of convenience out of it. And we've gone ahead and grabbed a couple assistants to show off the 800-pound carrying capacity that we've got available here. And unfortunately, I'm not able to lift it up to put it in the lockout position with all this weight on it here, but you can see we're all the way out, and we've got 3 guys on here, each close to 200 pounds. So we're not at that 800 yet, but we've definitely loaded this up heavily, and you can see easily we can support the weight. There's no give. And if you guys want to just walk out to the end and hop off, you can see that it's not going to tip or bend at all as they go to get off when they're way down on the far edge. So it'll easily handle all the heavy weights that you're going to throw at it. Thanks, guys. And you're gonna get the same 800-pound carrying capacity on our smaller tray. We don't have this one loaded up with any guys for you today, but you're gonna get that same capabilities just in a smaller format. So the first thing we're gonna wanna do when we start our install here is we wanna make sure that all of our parts are gonna fit where we want them to go. So we're gonna be installing a smaller sliding tray here that only slides one direction, and our customer also has a big enough compartment for a tray that will extend entirely across the trailer and slide out either side. They're both very similar, but you're gonna see a handle like this on each side of the one that slides on either side, and then this one here only slides out the one direction. This is for like a half compartment. You could kind of look at it like that. So before we go to put these in the trailer, to make them significantly lighter and to help us make sure everything's gonna fit, it's a lot easier to do, just use the rails. If we look at our rails, are the widest point here. So if the rails fit width-wise, we know we're good as far as our width goes there. So we know if we get our rails to fit, then the rest is gonna fit. So we'll get this top sliding tray out of the way because this is where most of the weight is, and we don't even really need this to get the rails installed. So we're just gonna pull up on the handle, slide it out. And this is gonna be the same if you're using one that'll slide out either direction. Just pull up on the handle and slide it one of the directions. This one has to go this direction, so we're gonna go this way. Once it hits the stop there, just like this, lift up on the tray and it'll continue to slide. We can then slide it all the way off until it's separated from our rail. That'll make it a whole lot lighter, and we're gonna grab our rail now and we can go set it in the trailer. So now we're just gonna slide it in place where we want it to go in our compartment. And we're gonna be putting ours right next to our other one here. And we used an extra set of hands to help us put this one in because it was so long. Otherwise, you could do it by yourself, but the sheer length of it just makes it difficult. So I recommend an assistant to help you put this one in. You want your rollers to be facing towards your compartment. So we only have rollers on the one side on our short one here because it only slides this direction. Our longer one here, since it can slide either direction, we'll have rollers on either side. So now that we've kind of got these mocked up in here, one of the things to look at is the rail slots here, the openings. Our tray slides in these. When we go to slide it out, it needs to clear our entryway here. So we're gonna slide this over. And we need to make sure that we're gonna clear the entryway on this side, as well as on our other tray here, making sure we're gonna be able to clear the entryway. So that's kind of some of the biggest things. We're gonna end up putting these pretty much side by side like this, just to make sure that we've got the clearance necessary on each side for this to fit in. All right, so now that we've got these sat in here, we can go ahead and kind of start getting them mounted up. So we need to make sure what's below, so to make sure that we're running our fasteners through, we don't accidentally damage anything. Now these ones here, we can easily feel below, right here on the outside. But some of the ones towards the center, we're gonna end up having to take our underbelly down before we secure it, just to verify we don't cause any damage to anything on the trailer. But we can still get all the 4 corners here fully installed, so that way it's not gonna move around on us. We can verify everything's gonna stay in place. And again, you can see right underneath these outer edges here, so we can easily run them right through here. So to make sure that we get these even and the same on each side, we're gonna measure our longer one first, and then we can use our other, our shorter one here. We can just butt right up against the longer one, and we know that this one's gonna be in the correct position. And in order to make sure that they stay centered between our doorway opening here, and that way it'll work on both sides, we're gonna measure from the wall over, and then we're gonna make this even on both sides. So what we're gonna end up doing is making this inner edge here right at 4 inches, and then we know that this is gonna clear right here if we've got it set like that. So we got that right there at 4 inches. We can see that this is gonna clear our compartment there. We'll then measure the other side and set it up to the exact same measurement, so that way we know it's the same straight across. And here we are on the other side. We're just adjusting this one a little bit to make it match the other side. And you will notice that this the depth of this one, it doesn't quite reach all the way across. We're very close to the door on that side, but we've got us a little gap on this side. You could center this if you wanted to, completely in the center, but we've decided we're going to give us a little bit of gap on the single door side over here, where it's the smaller compartment, and keep the both the trays the same where they meet on that larger door over there. All right, so now we're just going to start running some hardware down. We know that on these outer holes here, we're not going to hit anything down below, so we can go ahead and get them started. You get a bunch of different length screws in your kit in a couple of different styles. We're going to be using the shorter ones just because we can feel kind of the thickness of the wood. We know this is going to be plenty thick, a plenty long enough screw to dig in there and get plenty of meat. And it's also not going to stick out too far past the wood, so that way when we do go to run these in towards the center, we won't have to worry as much about damaging any components because it's not going to pass through as far. So we're just going to grab our Phillips bit and run this in place. All right, so we hopped down here below because we wanted to see how far that bolt was going to pass through. And here it is. You can just barely see kind of that indent where the head of the screw, the point of the screw passed all the way through the wood. So this gives me plenty of confidence that we're going to be able to run our hardware down in the center without having to worry about things below it. I'm probably going to put a small washer under the head of each of the bolts towards the middle. That way it won't even be able to pass through this little tiny bit, and I know I'll be safe to run those down all throughout the middle. So I don't have to pull this underbelly down, because pulling your underbelly down is not a fun task. You got to put it back up afterwards, and it's usually sealed with like an insulation expanding foam all across this. So you got to pull all that stuff out and then put it all back in. So if you can avoid taking this off by just making sure your bolts don't pass through, that'll save you a lot of time. If you do end up having to take this out, you can see here there's fasteners that run all the way around it. You have to remove those fasteners so you can pull this paneling down to see what's going on under it to make sure you don't damage anything. But again, we're going to be able to avoid all that by using the shorter screws, and you do get some washers in your kit, so we can even use the washers that it comes with to make sure that we don't pass all the way through our wood here. And now what we've done is we've gone over to the other side. I double checked my measurement to make sure it was still 4, and now I'm going to run these in. And that measurement of 4, that's not necessarily what it's going to be for you guys at home. That's what we decided to put this at. You'll want to make sure you're centering yours how you want your tray to work in your door. All right, so now that we've got our big tray mocked up with our 4 corner screws in, we're going to take our smaller tray, slide it up against this one, and then we can run those in, and we'll use this tray here as our template to get our smaller one installed. All right, so again, we're using our larger tray here as a template. We already measured and we got this exactly where we want it, and we know if we put this right up against it right here that we're going to clear for our tray being able to slide out, and we can also use this to kind of match it up so it all looks nice and uniform when we're done. So we're now just going to run these in 4 corners. On our smaller tray here, since it only comes out the one direction, it only has the roller on one side, so we can easily get to that hole at the very far end that would normally be under a roller, because if we can, the furthest holes are the best ones. I have to climb in the compartment here just a little bit. It's pretty far in there. And then I'm kind of squeezing it a little bit against my other rail, because we're using that as a template, so we know if we're tied up against it, we're going to be in the right position. And then we're going to run one in the opposite corner as well. All right, so now that we've got all the 4 corners installed, at this point you can double check your doors if you want, your trays. You could set those in, slide them in, make sure everything slides good. And if you're satisfied with your fit and everything, then you can just go ahead and finish installing your hardware. With our hardware, we want to make sure we've got at least 4 fasteners on each side. but we get enough bolts in our trays to do 6 on each side. But since you get the same hardware for the smaller tray as you do for the larger tray, we're going to use a little bit of the hardware from the smaller tray to add to our larger one. So in the end, we're going to have 5 on each side for our smaller one. And then for our larger one here, we're going to have 7 on each side because we were able to take a couple from the smaller tray kit, and we're going to use that on our bigger one here to make sure it stays equally secure. Okay, so I did want to show you some of the other hardware that you get in your kit here. And again, it's the same between these two. You get the same hardware package. So you're also going to get a bunch of these. You get about 12 of these as well. These are just longer versions of the screws we installed. So if you want longer ones, if you think you're going to need them, we've got those that come in the kit. We chose the shorter ones because we're trying not to pass through and potentially hit anything. And then you also get nuts and bolts here, which we are also going to use. They're not 100% necessary, but to ensure that when this thing slid all the way out, if they got this thing loaded up to the max, once you slide it out, you got a lot of weight here. There's a lot of leverage that wants to tip and pull kind of up on the far side of our carrier. So we're going to go ahead and use the nut and bolt just on the far edges, just to alleviate that lift up that's going to want to happen if you're really heavily loaded and you pull this out, just because of that leverage. I mean, we're talking 90 inches way over there. We slide this thing out, you know, we could have a huge leverage point on the fulcrum here. So we're going to bolt this down just to make sure, and we'll do the same thing with this one here on the outside. Our smaller one here, we shouldn't have any issues because with this one, when I screwed them in on the far end down there, when I put my screws in, I made sure to go heavy on the far end and then lighter on this side, because the weight's going to always be pushing kind of down here, but it wants to lift up on that far side when you slide this out. So we went extra heavy on the inside with the screws on that one, and then with these ones on these outer ones here, we're going to add that. We'll use a 5/16 drill bit to add these, and we're going to put these in the square holes. This is usually for dropping down carriage bolts, but it will work out great for our hardware here. We can see it'll fit down in there really easily. Could also put it in this one, but it's really close to this cross here, this crossbar, and I'm going to put a washer underneath the head of it for just extra surface area, and that's going to conflict with this cross beam here, so that's why we're going to use our square holes. So we'll just take our 5/16 drill bit. We already know that we're clear underneath here, and we're just going to run it straight down through. We'll place a washer on our bolt. We'll vacuum that stuff out of there. We'll just push it out of the way for now so we can get our bolt down in there. And it's pretty tight, and that's actually pretty common because we're drilling on wood, and while this is a 5/16 bolt, it should fit. When you go to drill out wood, it scrapes off those edges, but then some of that kind of swells back in because it's not a perfect clean cut. So we're just going to step this up to the next size, up from 5/16, which is going to be a 21/64, and this should probably be enough to clean up the mess that's left behind on the wood there to allow our bolt to drop down. Yeah, and that's all we needed right there. So we'll just stay with that next size up bit for our holes here, just to make it easier. We'll head down to the other side here where it passes through the bottom. We're going to place a washer on it and then follow that up with a nylon locking nut. And we're just going to loosely install this for now. Get this on here. And then we're going to drill out the remaining ones and get all these installed loosely. Since we already got our screws running, we can probably run this down, but I always like to leave hardware loose because that way if you need to shift things back and forth a little bit to make sure it all lines up perfect, you're able to do that and then tighten them down at the end. So over here on the opposite side, we're going to be doing it fairly similar but slightly different. So we used the square hole on the other side, but this one, this rack here, we weren't able to center it side to side without it not lining up properly with our other tray over there. We wanted both trays on the large compartment door to be even with one another, so they were even across. And in order to make them even over there, we had to have this side set in just a little bit, because we figured it would look better that way when you open the compartment rather than having this one kind of offset from that one but centered here. So that pushes this tray a little bit towards the passenger side over there. So if we go down through the square holes, we're actually going to be just on the inside of the I-beam, which means we would have to take down that underbelly and make sure we're not going to damage anything like that we talked about. So all we got to do is, if instead of using these square holes here, we move to this round hole right here, and this actually puts us just to the outside of the I-beam. We're actually going to hit the I-beam just a little bit, but that doesn't matter because we're going to drill straight down through it, and then really all that's going to do is make this side even stronger because we're going to be bolted through this and the I-beam right down below. So I've gone ahead and drilled out this side over here. Now we are not going to put a washer on top because of the offset here. So we're just going to drop the bolt down so that way it sits flat, and that's fine. We wanted the washer with the square hole because the square hole was a little bit bigger, and we wanted the washer to give us that surface area we needed. But this hole here is the same diameter as our thread, so we get plenty of meat around the head, so we don't have to worry about the washer on top with this one. We're then just going to place a washer down below with a nut to secure it on the other side. And you can see down here where it came out through our I-beam right there. And that's going to make sure that this side is super strong. And since we kind of set this tray up to be a little bit, slightly more accessible on the passenger side compartment door, we assume they're going to be pulling it out that side more often. That way this side's going through metal, they'll have even more leverage compensation because of this. All right, so now that we've got all those loosely installed, we'll grab our socket and wrench and get those tightened down. All right, now that we've got it fully secured all the way around, let's grab our trays and get those slid into place. I am gonna probably grab a vacuum real quick too and just clean up any of this mess here. We don't wanna leave any of our shavings behind, and then we'll slide our trays in. So we've gone ahead and pulled it outside to give ourselves some extra room to work here. And we've got an extra set of hands to help us slide our tray back in. You'll need to tilt it down just a little bit to line up the handle. So we'll line up our handle mechanism first, get that to slide in, and then we can get our bearing to follow that. You'll have a point where you'll have to lift up just slightly right there. You'll hear it hit, and it should slide in the rest of the way just like that. We'll go ahead and slide our other tray in. The smaller one here, you shouldn't need an extra set of hands with. You can get one if you think you need one, but this one's considerably lighter. And without the handle being on the other side for this one, it's a lot easier to line it up than the one that has the handle. So there we go, we've got both of our trays in. When you're ready to use them, simply lift the handle and it slides out. That's its maximum travel right there. So if you go any further, you'd have to lift up, and that would cause the tray to be able to slide all the way out. So I don't recommend going beyond the point where it stops there to allow it to make sure it doesn't fall any further. Now there is one little spot, if we go up, it will let us kind of get into a locked out position right here. So you can go into this position and be okay. That way it won't slide back in if you're trying to get some stuff out. You got some heavy things, sometimes it's easier to kind of brace your body on it. So you can put it in this position. But again, if you go beyond that, the entire tray will slide out. So just be careful to not go beyond that position. And that completes our installation of MORryde's sliding storage trays on our 2020 Grand Design Momentum.